Today, I'm chatting to Jason Campbell. Jason is a highly regarded expert in Zen meditation and practice. He's a 7th-degree black belt in karate, a chart-topping composer specializing in meditation music, and he's the co-founder of Zen Wellness.com. It's a company that offers an array of resources in Zen Wellness meditation practice. He's been teaching full-time for over 17 years, and he currently owns Kung Fu, Zen Yoga, and Zen Wellness Centers. His meditation and Zen training began as a child through music, and it seems like his whole life has been an effort to combine Eastern arts, meditation, and music. He's released 7 albums so far. Some of them debuted at #1, both on Billboard and on Amazon. And I really love the topic of meditation myself. I know there are so many successful entrepreneurs and people in the world who have meditation practice, and I started meditating myself about 2 years ago on a daily basis for about 15 to 20 minutes every single day. And I feel a different person since I started kind of incorporating these habits. So I'm really glad to have you on the show and chat about Zen and wellness. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Yeah, hey, thank you for having me on, Yuli.
Yeah, happy to have you. I think maybe a great starting point, I'm curious to know what kind of led you into meditation and Zen in your own life?
Well, if we go back 41 years, I was 8 years old. I'm 49 now.
You're 49 now, really? Are you serious? You don't look 49.
Well, thank you. I was an 8-year-old at the piano, and my teacher said to me, never ever listen to the notes. She said, idiots listen to notes. Masters listen to the space or the silence in between the note. Because when you listen to a note, your mind is cluttered. You hear nothing. When you listen to the space or the silence, your mind gets very clear, and then you hear everything. And at the time, it was just, okay, that makes sense. And I did it, and I would practice listening. We'd play a chord, listen to the space. And if you don't hear, if everything is really fast, the discipline is you don't listen. If there's nothing in between the notes to hear, then there's silence underneath. So it's like seeing the canvas underneath the painting is the discipline. And so I grew up with that and not even thinking it was that big a deal. That's just what we did. And it wasn't years later until I was formally trained in my teens when I actually learned, the meditation and the martial arts and the yoga, that I said, oh, wait a minute, this is actually what I've been doing this entire time. It's the same thing about going to that place where the mind gets very still and very clear. And what happens is you shut off that internal dialogue and you shut off the voice in the head that goes blah, 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 that just constantly runs. You learn to turn that off and go to the place of just complete stillness, because in that place of complete stillness, well, there's all types of benefits. I mean, you can Google benefits, and we can talk about the brain chemistry and the dopamine and the serotonin that it starts to create in the brain. We can talk about happiness, but it's also a place where you really get into creativity. It's like the creativity it comes out of the stillness. So it's like from nothing grows something. And it's and I encourage everyone, if you're not meditating, well, I do encourage to start. We can talk about how and how to do it and some real simple exercises. But it's a really, really powerful process. And so I did the music. I went to music college. I went to Berkeley Music College, and I studied there. I did all types of cool stuff there. But at the same time, I was doing all my training and all my Zen training. And it was in my early 20s, I decided, okay, so what is it that I want to do like full time? And, from a career viewpoint, what do I want to focus on? And so I focused on building up the Zen organization and the Zen wellness and my own personal cultivation, my own studies, and raised a family, and, went through a whole process. And about 5 years ago, came back to writing the music, and did that in our first, just for our organization, just for our students. My business partner was saying to me for many years, why don't you start scoring music for us? It's like, I don't know, it's too much work. I don't have the time to do it. I just didn't, I didn't have it. But then once I did one album, then the second album and the third album, and then, by the fall, I'll have the 9th album will come out, which will complete like an entire series of albums. And right now I'm working on my 2020 project. So it's like we have so much mojo and momentum that's going on with the music, and combining the music with the meditation, and then also the music with the physical discipline, like the movement discipline and the standing disciplines.
You mentioned you started learning like yoga, Tai Chi, and all those spiritual practice. Like, why did you go to learn those topics, and where do you find your mentors? I mean, how do you get exposed to those kind of things?
It's a really good question. Now, granted, this was in the 80s, and so things were very different than they are now.
No internet. Yeah.
That's right. We didn't have one of these. You couldn't go on YouTube and look stuff up. You actually had to find it. And I think, I was actually very fortunate because I had some really, really high level teachers actually in my area. I grew up in the Boston area. And so I just got really exposed to it. So I suppose I have very good teacher karma, that even from a young age, I just was surrounded by, not just in music, but in all of the Zen arts. I was surrounded by a lot of great masters. I've been very fortunate to train with a lot of great masters in these disciplines.
Mm-hmm. From which age you would say you start actually meditating and having a meditation practice?
Well, I was doing it before I called it meditation. So that was just at age 8. I just stop and I would just listen.
The music was your meditation, or were you actually doing some form of practice?
Yeah, that really was, because ultimately, it was, it's this analogy. If I take a snow globe and I shake the snow globe, well, there's turbidity there. And just through going throughout your day and living life, we experience mental and emotional turbidity. A lot of that's the voice in the head. But when we stop and we're still, and over a period of time, the turbidity settles. And when that settles, then we have clarity. And that's about like having that mental and emotional clarity, in what I mentioned before, turning the voice off in the head. And the way we tie it into the music is like the songs are 5 minutes and the beats is 1 beat per second. There's a bell every 4 seconds. And so when you hear it's really simple. You just put on one song, close your eyes. When you hear the bell, you breathe in. When you hear the bell, you breathe out. And just by being like still, like stopping, we experience a little more clarity, or I like to say space between action and reaction. Because when there's no space between action and reaction, then we react. When there's space between action and reaction, then you respond. And just mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, you're so much better when you're in that state of, you're not in a reactive state.
Mm-hmm. How else do you get to this state besides meditation, by the way? Like what other ways ever? Yeah, well, okay, so it's a really good question. There's different types of meditation. Like the simplest type of meditation, like the one I can teach your listeners right now would be a sitting meditation. I could say, put on one song, breathe to the bell, and then if we really want to do one more exercise, we can say to ourselves, you ask the question, I wonder what thought I'm going to have next. And when you ask yourself that question, what it does is it activates the observer, because we can think of we have the incessant stream of thoughts, blah, blah, blah. And then we have that which observes the thoughts. And so it's almost like we're of two minds, we could say. And even that teaching is in the word human being, because the human part, when you and I were 8 years old, we're very different now, the human part from when we were 8. But the being part, the observer, that's still the same. The being, the watcher right here. So when you activate that and you start to watch your thoughts, you build that observer muscle. And so the analogy I like to use, it's like a cat looking at a mouse hole. A cat just stares and waits for a mouse to come out. And you say, I wonder what thought I'm going to have next. Just watch. And eventually a thought's going to come out, but when it comes out, okay, you let it go. And then you say, I wonder what thought I'm going to have next. And that's like the internal, very simple internal discipline that you can do to start to slow down the incessant stream of thinking. Or you'll have moments where like no mice come out of the mouse hole. You have no thought. And you just have that. And that's what we're really going for, that no thought. What will happen is at some point you'll realize you're not having a thought and then you lose it.
oh, wow, I'm doing it. I'm so cool. Wow, I'm doing this meditation. Well, in that moment, you just lost it because now you're thinking again.
Yeah.
But that's okay because it's building a muscle. And even that little tiny gap, just one moment, is really, really powerful. And that's where like a lot of the magic of the meditation happens. So to answer your question, that's something that I think, I don't know, there's maybe 5 minutes or 3 minutes to explain. Anyone can do that. You can do it right now. You can do it from anywhere. If you can, use some of the music that we do, use the music, but it doesn't matter. You don't need the music. The music is a tool, but it's not the end result. It makes it a lot easier to do it. It gives you a focal point. It's, beautiful. It's elegant. There's a 5-element teaching in the music, but ultimately you can do it anywhere. You don't need anything. You could just stop and close your eyes, say, I wonder what thought I'm going to have next, and start to activate that observer.
I like that what you were saying is so easy. As you said, like anyone can literally do it anytime. What I'm wondering is, how often do you think you should ask this question? I mean, is it something you need to regularly ask throughout the day to kind of keep you and bring you back to awareness? Or is it something you ask once in the evening or once in the morning just to get it a habit? Like what is the right frequency maybe to ask it?
Well, yeah, and a lot of that is, well, if we look at our thoughts, it's been estimated we have between 60,000 and 100,000 thoughts per day. Now, it's also been estimated that 99 or so % of those thoughts are the exact same thoughts we had yesterday. So
really?
There's like it's a skipped record analogy. I don't know, maybe some of the listeners might have to Google what that means, but it's like a record that skips. And just
I'll put a link in the show notes for people who don't know.
And we have a repeating thoughts. You just loop thoughts over and over again. Well, most of the thoughts that we have, you don't need. And so you're better off with having space or moments of no thought. Like, you never have to worry about, what if I'm not going to be thinking? No, you'll be thinking. The mind will kick back in. You'll start thinking. And so the more often you can have the gaps of no thought, in general, the better off you're going to be. It's like you can never overdo it, what's going to happen. But it's not just done through sitting meditation. You do it through physical activity, and also it comes through trauma sometimes. But most people at some experience or some time in their life has experienced where like everything gets slow, things stop. Sometimes it can come through physical training. Even if you play sports, I mean, I did it all, in a lot of that in, martial arts, and yoga is really, really good for that. We do a lot of the Tai Chi and the Qigong now. And that gets the mind to stop, but to stop while you're actually doing movement and then connected into your body. Sometimes happens in trauma. Sometimes maybe a car accident.
How does it get trauma?
The what?
How does it happen in trauma?
Everything slows down. The voice in the head stops because you're in danger. And that's, it's a whole different chemistry that kicks into the body when you're in danger. A lot of cortisol, your body starts to dump. But, use an example like a car accident or something. Sometimes everything moves in slow motion because the thinking mind stops and you're fiercely aware of everything that's going on. So that sometimes, sometimes happens. I mean, that's not the ideal situation to have these.
Not the positive way to get to the state.
Yeah, but it does happen when that. So there's a lot of different ways to get to that point. It's kind of, the analogy I like to use is there's many paths up the mountain. And ultimately, how you get up the mountain is how you get up the mountain. I mean, we work with a lot of people, and we work with a lot of also like very successful entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are like have a lot of brain activity, or very, very smart, and a lot of thinking.
You need it to be a successful entrepreneur.
Yes, it's the great strength and the great weakness, because sometimes it's hard to turn that off. And when you can't turn that off, you get a lot of stress. And so we work with them on a sitting practice, but then also just, okay, if that's harder for you to sit, then we get it moving, doing like a lot of different, physical movements where you connect with your breath.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that most successful entrepreneurs are meditators as well?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, and I don't know how you could function without it. It's it's like sharpening your blade. I think there's the lumberjack analogy. And the young foolish lumberjack says, I don't have time to sharpen my blade. I'm too busy cutting down trees. Where, the seasons one. Well, wait a minute. That's the whole part of take time to sharpen your blade. And the meditation is sharpening your mind. And it's like somebody saying, oh, I don't have time to take care of my body, to do any type of exercise. Well, okay, you can get away with that for a little while, but ultimately your mind functions better, your body functions better, you feel better, you get better at everything that you do when you have strong vitality in your body.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's ironic, but I think necessarily the most successful people, I also observe it, they're meditators and they have time to do it, but other people who say, I don't have time to meditate, they're actually doing, what's the right word? Like they're not performing as highly maybe in life.
That's right. That's right. Well, and that's one of the reasons that we wrote the music in 5-minute songs, because everybody can do 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And okay, 20 years ago when I was teaching this, you'd say, meditate for an hour at night and an hour in the morning, and people would say, oh, okay. And they'd do it, and they'd sit and they'd meditate for an hour. Well, society is very different. Try saying that to somebody now, they're not going to do it. I mean, from the viewpoint of 20 years ago, I could never have imagined I'd be writing 5-minute songs for meditation, but that's where we're at. The collective attention span, Microsoft did a study, and they say over the last 10 years, the collective attention span has gone from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. Really? And a goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds. And the reason for is very obvious. We're back to this. This has knocked a lot of the attention span down. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's hard to function without one of these. We all love our smartphones, but at the same time, there's a great danger of that because it does scatter the brain, and you got to be really, really careful. It's kind of like the greater the light, the darker the shadow.
So how can you mitigate it?
There's a lot of darkness that can be in the phone and just a technology addiction and just the mind never stopping, the mind continuing to churn. So you got to, put it down, or if you do music on it, fine, but, turn it off, turn the ringers off, and then go inward and just be very still. And so even the discipline of just the small 5 minutes, because then 5 minutes can lead to 10, can lead to 15, can lead to 20. But if you just do the 5 and make it consistent, it's amazing. After about 7 days of it, you start to feel that little bit of difference little space between action and reaction.
So most importantly, if anyone listening and we don't have a practice, is just to get started and do any amount of time, and it'll start kind of feeling some sort of effect after a certain amount of time, if I get it right.
Yeah, exactly right.
Cool. Yeah. And what are your recommendations for dealing with this amazing device I don't have in front of me, but the phone? Because everyone uses the phone today, and I observe myself around the world. Everyone is addicted. Everyone is all day also on social media a lot of time. Do you have any recommendations for how to mitigate the effects? I know it's an amazing device, but as I said, it has its downsides if you don't use it correctly.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of it is just understanding that you want to have times where you have no thought. You'll function better, and the ding, 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 and every moment and every scrolling, like the continuous scroll, you have to be careful of that. If you tell somebody not to do that, well, don't do that. It's not going to happen. So it's usually easier to add than take away. And so if we're going to say, what's the thing to add some type of meditation, add some type of physical movement into your day where you're not on the phone and you're not scrolling and you have all the notifications and everything turned off so you can disconnect from it. That's much easier to say than, okay, stop doing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And then potentially would want to just automatically, by the meditation, have less. I noticed that myself, for example, I'm very relaxed after I meditate. So I usually do my meditation. I do a 20-minute one in the morning, and I'm also very focused afterwards. But it seems like I'm starting to lose it maybe towards the second half of the day usually. And that's usually when I go on my phone. I can be all day until the evening without touching my phone. Are there any things which I can do or someone in my situation do to keep this stability and focus throughout the day as well?
Well, I like to think of the meditation. Let's look at it from a few different viewpoints. In meditation and also, physical exercise, think of it like showers. Like if we said, hey, I'm not going to take any showers this week. I'm just going to take 7 showers on Sunday. It doesn't work. So, so if you said, hey, I'm going to, meditate for an hour this week, well, and I'm just going to wait till Sunday and I'm going to do an hour. No, you're better off doing 10 minutes a day or whatever that comes out to. Then we can say, hey, what about morning time and nighttime? So even if you take like little breaks throughout the day, and again, as little as 5 minutes, it could be 2 minutes, but just even 5 minutes, put on one song, morning, afternoon, evening, and they're just little recharging breaks, again, because this shakes. And especially when you're doing stuff, when you're moving and you're growing a business, you're making deals, dealing with a family, whatever it is you're dealing with. And then this is, hey, let's just put this snow globe down for 5 minutes and then let this happen. And then sure, then you do this again and then you put it down again. And the more often you can do that in general, the better you're going to feel and the better you're going to function, because it's actually kind of profound what you just said. It's like you get it, you feel relaxed, you get going, and then maybe by the afternoon, you're not feeling as good as you were in the morning. Well, come right back to this, because there's no downside to this. There's no negative side effects. There's nothing, and you're not going to do it too much. It's just not going to happen, and you just continue to function better.
Got it. So you think just adding another 10 to 20 minute practice in the second part can literally return the same amount or focus or whatever it is I'm feeling towards the latter part of the day?
You got it. And there's a saying of this, old sayings about, the teacher that says to the students, okay, you need to meditate, whatever, I'll fill out a number, 30 minutes a day. Oh, I don't have time. Okay, then do 15 minutes a day. Oh, I don't have time. Well, then do 5 minutes a day. Oh, I don't have time. Well, then you need an hour. It's like, if you don't have time for 5 minutes, and you need an hour, because you are so turbid in your head if you don't think you have time for that. It's like saying, I don't have time for any type of exercise to take care of my body, but you need to. It's like not taking a car in for maintenance. I mean, I could make so many analogies, but eventually if you don't take your car in for maintenance, you're going to have bigger problems with your car than when you were maintaining it. And especially if you want to be successful in any type of business, because you are the business. There's a great analogy, Joe Polish with the Genius Network makes the analogy of, think of yourself as the prized racehorse. And if you had a prized racehorse or a money horse that was making you money and was your cash flow, you'd take very nice care of that horse. You'd train it, you'd make sure the sleeping is good, you'd put nice music, you'd feed it the best foods. You wouldn't stuff fast food and soda down its throat and have it wake up all night on a phone. And I mean, you wouldn't do that to it. You'd be so nice to that prized racehorse. Well, what's the analogy? You're the prized racehorse. I'm the prized racehorse. So we are all our own racehorse. And so you really want to be very nice to yourself and take very good care of yourself as if you were doing it to your money horse.
Yeah, I have the same belief. Like my health is my top priority always. So if for some reason I'll do less things in business just to make sure my health is in a kind of good state. What other things you can do to take care of yourself, which either you're doing or you can recommend to others?
Well, there's a concept here. This is this book comes out next month. It's Journey Around the Sun, the Zen Wellness book. And here, those three characters right there, it's actually a really, really profound teaching. And the characters say Jing, Qi, and Shan. Okay, so we don't need to remember what the words are, but what the meaning is: matter, energy, and consciousness. And that's ultimately what we're made up of. There is like the physical, what you can touch, we call that the Jing, that's the matter. There's the energy, the Qi that runs through it, the electricity, or bioelectricity, that is also the breath. That's also emotion that we have, all runs through that current. And then we have what was called Shan, which we could call spirit. We could call it consciousness. You could call it mind. I never like to get caught up on the words. We can use whatever words work for you. But it's like if we have H2O shows up as a solid, a liquid, and a vapor. And so we show up as basically a solid, then the liquid would be like the energy, the Qi, and then the vapor would be the spirit. And so our whole training program, what we do is about aligning the three. Because you can go to a gym and you can go on a treadmill, and that's better than doing nothing. But like if you're just on a treadmill and you're, watching TV, well, think about that's an active disconnect of your mind and your body. And usually the breath is like that. It's not a deliberate breath. So when you do that, you're 1 for 3. Again, better than doing nothing, but we can use that time much more wisely. And so if you do whatever exercise you do, you add the breath and you add the mind. Okay, so what does that mean? So it's like, let's say you're lifting weights. It's with each weight, you add a deliberate inhale when it goes out, exhale when you're exerting tension. But then here's
like focusing on the breath.
Well, then the mind goes into whatever part you're exercising. So it's like you put the mind right into it. Your body goes right and you hold it into, again, I'm just using a curl as an example. It can be anything. Mm-hmm. But when you can add that intense going inward of your mind, add the breath. So it's like one breath with each repetition. In general, you exhale when you're exerting force. You inhale when it's coming back in. And if you do it a few times, you'll kind of naturally, you'll figure it out. Then you get so much more out of that period of time. So like in the movements that we do, they're all coordinated like to music. It's 4/4 timing, 1 beat per second. There's an inhalation, an exhalation, and you're going on to each of the movements. So, in 5, 10, 15 minutes, 3 songs or like 3 sets of little exercises, you get so much done in your body because everything is aligned and you're not disconnected.
Mm-hmm. So that's what you do in more Eastern practices. They combine the Jing, the Qi, and the Shen basically in one practice and try work all those Chinese elements basically.
You got it. It's called, we say the word we use is unite the 3. Jing, Qi, and Shen, matter, energy, and consciousness. And so in all the movements, there's something that you're doing with those 3.
What can someone listening in maybe can do? I'm familiar with those terms. I don't think many people listening in may be familiar, but what can you do to actually use those 3 more? Is it just mainly being aware of everything you're doing? Is there anything else?
That's a really good question. And the first thing is just being aware of the existence of that things work in those 3s and know the difference. Like, because we tend to think everything is just matter, like as everything is form. I think Deepak Chopra has a great term. He calls it, see if I get this right, the superstition of materialism, meaning if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. Well, there's a lot of things that exist that we can't see. And even we know that in science, we certainly know that. And there is energy and there's chi. Like if you go to an acupuncturist, they will look at your body from the viewpoint of the chi. If you go to a surgeon, well, they're going to look at your body from the viewpoint of the matter, the Jing. And then, you see for spiritual, well, you see a guru, for the viewpoint of spiritual. So just knowing that they all exist and seeing that's the first thing. And again, it's kind of like starting to see the matrix and see form and to see how things work. And then really, the breath and the emotion is the Qi, because if you do some of the Qigong and the Tai Chi and even some martial art styles where you really get into your breath and you really have breath mastery, well, what that starts to do is dissolve a lot of emotional issues. I like to say that you can regulate or solve, it's kind of a funny word, but let's use the word for now. Well, it's not completely correct, but solve at least half of your emotional issues just with breath. Because what it does is the breath regulates the emotion. Now, there's some emotional issues. Breath is not enough. You have to do other work and other things and stuff with relationships. But a lot of it, you can just use the breath. And in trying to regulate emotions without the breath, well, that's tough to do. Very, very tough to do. To do it just through talking or even just through therapy, it's hard to do if you're not doing some type of breath work. It's like you're not using a really, really important tool.
Is there any specific type of breath work which you love doing or can recommend?
Yeah, well, there's a ton of them. And when we, these are different courses that we teach and we can go really advanced. But the most simple one,
let's do this.
It ties into the music, because when you hear the music, there's a bell every 4 seconds. And all you do is you just breathe in for 4 seconds, then exhale for 4 seconds. And then in general, breathe in through the nose. And then you can exhale through the nose or the mouth, whatever's more comfortable. Now, some people might have big lungs. Maybe you need to do 8 seconds, 12 seconds. I mean, there's breath work where you breathe in for a minute and you breathe out for a minute. And there's all types of like variations on that. But that's just the simplest one is to see if you can just slow down your breathing and even be mindful of the breathing, because we breathe unconsciously. And, we breathe unconsciously, it keeps us alive, but you don't fully utilize the, just the power of the breath.
Mm-hmm. And when you meditate, you do the same, basically? You kind of focus on your breath like this. Do you think it matters when you meditate to do the breath work in the same time?
In the beginning, I always recommend that, to do the breath work, because that keeps you focused on something. Because if we go back to I wonder what thought I'm going to have next, that activates the observer, so you're watching your thoughts. But if you can stay regulated in your breath, that helps. If you mess up the breath and you stop thinking about the breath because you're saying, I wonder what thought I'm going to have next, that's fine. There's a saying that there's no such thing as good or bad Zen, there's only Zen. So when you stop and you do a meditation, oh, that was a good meditation, oh, that was a bad meditation. Don't worry about any of that. Just be still and build the muscle and enjoy the process that we're doing. But it is really good, and that's why we have the bell in the music every 4 seconds to just remind you when to breathe. And the reason the songs are 5 minutes, because then it's one song, it works as a timer. Then it's one song, or if you do 2 songs, so you can time it out.
Interesting. I know we're throwing the term Zen many times. Could you maybe define the difference between Zen and meditation real quick? It's something I think I'm also confusing many times.
Okay. Explaining the word Zen is a funny thing. It's kind of like explaining the word God, because whatever words you're going to use aren't really it. And sometimes we use words are like a signpost, a pointer. And so Zen, there's different famous stories of this. And here's a story of Zen. And it was, of course, the master and the student were walking, and the student says to the master, "What is Zen?" And the master's response was, first it was silence. And then a few minutes later, he said, "Can you hear the mountain stream?" And the student couldn't hear the mountain stream because the student was scattered, was just thinking, oh, what is Zen? Oh, and then when the master is silent, oh, what is the master going to say? Oh, does he like me? Was that a stupid question? Blah, 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 all this internal dialogue. But when you're caught up in internal dialogue, you don't hear what's around you. So when he said, "Can you hear the mountain stream?" at first he couldn't. And then a few moments later, he started listening. And it was so faint in the background. Then he could hear it. So a few moments later, he said, "Yes, I hear it." And then the master said, "Enter Zen from there," which again, he gave him the entry point, and he didn't give him a definition of what Zen is. And so circles back to what we're talking about of this, dropping the mind. And it's like, if you say, hey, what does something taste like? We use food, and I give you a recipe. Okay, but ultimately you got to eat it. And then you can experience, and then you know it. You can't know food from a recipe. You have to know it from experiencing it. And Zen is the same thing.
Interesting. So what other tools, maybe just to list them down for people listening in, you can use to quieten down the chatter? We have meditation, we have music, there is like some physical work. What else kind of falls down under this category? Is it individual? Are there more things like as tools or practices one can have to do it?
Yeah, well, really, it's within there. I mean, if we say, what are ways of doing it? Well, go back to the 3, the Jing, Qi, and the Shan, is, through breath, through movement, and through stillness. One of our training programs that we do is called Sit, Stand, Move. And there's a sitting practice, a standing practice, and then a moving practice. And they're all just broken up into little 5-minute segments that you do. So those are really, that's like the core or the root. And then from there, there's many different variations that you can do with this. I mean, I have, some of our members, part of their Zen is, going for a mountain walk every morning or whatever. It doesn't have to be in the mountain. It can be anywhere. Some of them, it's walking their dog in the morning. You go out and you have your experience where everything is quiet, and then you're out and everything is still and you're moving and you have the breath. And so it's kind of like when you understand the core or the essence of it, you can apply it into many different ways. We have a lot of artists listen to the music, and they'll put the music on in the background just for creativity. A lot of writers do that as well, and they'll just put it on because it starts to stimulate creativity. We have the music goes on, and a bunch of ERs now play the music. And
really, like for patients?
Yeah, to chill everyone out. ERs are crazy places, and so to do that, we have the music is in, therapists' offices, of course, wellness centers and yoga studios use it, but also believe it or not, they just started this. There's a prison program uses the music to teach inmates meditation. I thought that was so awesome.
Really?
Yeah, there's, sit down, shut up, breathe to the bell. And they're doing it. They're doing it morning and nighttime. And so they're using this album, and they're bringing our whole program in there, which is, I just love that. It's actually,
which effects do they find?
It just started. I mean, I know exactly what they're going to find. I mean, everyone's going to be better off and going to be a little bit more chill. It's like we already know the results of it before it started, but it just got implemented this week. It's been over a year in the making. So that's really, really cool to start to see that. And actually, believe it or not, it's also used in hospice. They're doing a study right now. They're able to use it, at end of life, the music instead of drugs. So they've found that people are just, having a much more peaceful experience in hospice when they don't have to jack them up in drugs. So it's being used like all over the place, beyond where I thought it would be when I first started writing it. I mean, the last album hit #1 on Billboard, and it's being used in all types of ways. So a lot of these stuff, I'll get emails or, some of the different ways it's being used, which is really, really cool, because that wasn't when we started it. It was really just for our members and just to help them in all their practice. And it's really blossomed.
How, what needs to be special about this music? Is there something special? Are those specific frequencies which needs to happen? I mean, what's special about the music?
Yeah, there's a lot. Okay, so let's even back up. Okay. There is a Eastern concept called 5 elements. Okay. And we look at, it's called wood, fire, earth, metal, water. But it's not literal wood, literal fire. It's a metaphor for a repeating pattern that we see in nature. And I had mentioned the movie The Matrix before. If you can see the 5 elements and see them everywhere, and then see Jing, Qi, and Shen, like it's called the 3 treasures. Well, then you're really seeing the Matrix, because you see how a lot of things repeat.
What are the 5 elements?
The what?
What are the 5 elements? Can you go over this for?
Yeah. So again, it's metaphor. So it's not literal wood, literal fire. So first, I mean, masters 4,000 years ago figured this out. It's like, hey, nature tends to work in 5. And hey, we have 5 fingers. It's like with the decimal system. We have 10. In Eastern medicine, there's 5 sets of organs. Also, we call it the 5 senses. There's 5 vowels. We break the seasons up into 5. We just say, instead of 4 seasons, we say early summer and late summer. If you even look at your life, if we think of your life as one day, there's the metaphor here. We call it 108 years as one day. There's different phases of your life, 5 different life phases. Wood, early summer, late summer, fall, and then winter. And they're all divided up into times, like in elements. So 0 to 8 is the springtime. That's the wood element. And that's everything is new. And you're sprouting. You're growing really fast. 8 to 33, we call that fire or early summer. That's look at me, what I'm going to be. And that's when you start to actualize yourself. That's when a lot of the clay hardens. I mean, you're always learning, but you go through a lot of that foundation. 33 to 58, we call that the earth phase. And that's also when you do a lot of your life's work in that, in that phase, 33 to 58. A lot of times you raise a family during that phase. not all the time, but that does happen. 58 to 83, we call that the fall, the autumn, or that would be the metal element. And that's literally things start to fall. Like your skin falls, your organs fall, people start to fall. And we want to really make sure that, you know, from a life phase that you're prepared. You're prepared in your body, you're prepared emotionally, prepared spiritually. 53 to 80, 58 to 83. And then 83 to 108, we call that winter or water element. And that's actually ultimately, you know, preparation for death and all of eternity. Or it's also about giving away. There's a saying like, give away everything before you die. And that's not just your physical things. Yes, you can give away your physical things, but that's what you know and who you are and your wisdom and your experience. And so I'm getting a little heavy here, but if we look at your life as one day and 5 elements, well, it's pretty powerful, because then you can say, hey, what season of life am I in right now? And what's the most appropriate behavior for the seasons? The way we do our training program, Journey Around the Sun, is the season, the year is broken up into 5 different seasons. And the way we do the training in the springtime is different than the way we do it in the fall, because we're harmonizing with nature and we're just harmonizing with what's around us. And so, okay, so back to the question about the music. In the music, there is a 5-element teaching in the music. And when I say it's a teaching, it's not a verbal teaching in language. It's a teaching in music. And so I'll take a mantra. Like there's a famous mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, which is a Buddhist mantra. And actually, if you just, you know, say Om Mani Padme Hum, those 6 syllables, 10,000 times, you'll learn a whole lot more about Buddhism than if you study and, you know, study the Noble Truths and the 8-Limb Path and all that stuff. But we have a mantra. And so in one of my albums, I took that mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, and let's look at that from a wood viewpoint. Let's look at that from a fire viewpoint. Let's look at that from an earth viewpoint. And I go around the cycle. So if you just put on the album, subconsciously you learn the patterns of the elements. And you'll just do it. Now, it's not a verbal language. It's not an intellectual language. It's a musical language. But the wood songs tend to sprout. The fire goes out and disperses. The earth is flat and sweet. The metal splits and falls. And then the water element flows. And then there's natural like tensions that go on within the music, within the harmonies and the orchestrations. And so I have Om Mani Padme Hum. I did a Om Namah Shivaya, which is another mantra. I did an Om Shanti Om. That was the one that reached #1 on Billboard. And so we take these mantras. I mean, I have piano music, I have instrumental music. Those are a few of them. And I want to mention this one comes out next week. I don't know when we're going to be broadcasting this, but this comes out in June.
Should be live by then, yeah.
Okay, cool. June 2019. This is the 7 chakras. And so it's like one song for each of the 7 different energy centers. So kind of one of the things I do with the music, I know both languages. I know the Eastern alchemy, the spiritual, the medicine. I know that language, and I know the musical language. And so I almost think of it as I translate it. I take these concepts and I put them in the music, but then it's not just music for music's sake. It's also to be very practical, to help you with your transformation and to help with meditation. You know, so you put on a song, you do the breath work, and you do it, or you do the movement work, and everything ties in together.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. One topic I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on while I have you on is the topic of emotions. Like, what do you think can be done to regulate your emotions? I think it's relating to what you spoke about in the Qi, in this energy as well. I mean, meditation is helping, but are there any other things which one can do? Because people are so emotional today. Everyone are emotional. Sometimes I get angry as well. Like, what can you do to regulate it?
Yeah, well, we're living in a time where the most disease is actually emotional. If you go back 100 years, the diseases were in the body, and a lot of it was in food and food sickness. But we're in a different, just phase of humanity right now, where if you even go to the doctor, they ask you, how do you feel? How do you feel of this? And, how is this feeling? And so everything is about feeling, if you really think about that. Because, okay, let's pretend for a moment I have 2 pills. I don't have 2 pills, but let's just pretend. One pill makes you healthy but not happy. The other pill makes you happy but not healthy. Oh, it's a tricky thing. Which one would you take? Usually you'd rather be happy, because if you're healthy and not happy, Okay, great. If you're happy and not healthy, okay, at least you're happy. And so really so much is an emotion, and so much of, we can say success or fulfillment is going to be in the emotion more than anything else. Now that's kind of an absurd thing, because it's much easier to be happy when you are healthy. It's just easier, and it's harder when you're not healthy. There's a saying of the person with good health has 1,000 wishes. The person with poor health has one wish. So that's why it's very, very important. And of course, the one wish is to be healthy. That's the only thing you care about when you're not healthy. And so what do we do about emotions? Well, if we go down into the viewpoint of Eastern medicine, each emotion is a vibrational frequency. And the frequencies actually live different parts of the body. So if we go back to the 5 elements, if we say the wood element, well, the wood element, the negative emotion with that is anger, and that actually lives in the liver. And it's really true. So the frequency of anger hangs out at this part of the body. The frequency of shock hangs out in your heart. That's the fire element. The frequency of worry hangs out in your stomach and spleen. Sometimes you heard the saying, quit worrying, you'll get an ulcer. It's actually true, because that's where the worry vibration hangs out. That's the earth element. The metal element is grief, that hangs out in the lungs. And then water is kidney, which is fear. And so if you start to look at the cycle, there's so much mastery just by learning these 5 elements. You can see emotions, where they hang out in the body, and what to do about them. So for example, we have grief, which is in the lungs, which is metal, it creates water. That's why we have tears after we have grief. The other thing is, if we have so much grief, what's the element that we use to regulate it? I'm giving a really short example here, is we want to do things that are fiery. Like all things in the fire element help push down when we have grief. Okay, so what does that mean for practical purposes? Well, when you have grief, you sweat, or you should do some type of really physical, intense workout, like hot yoga. You go do hot yoga. If you sit in a steam room or do things that sweat. Laughter is also part of the fire element, and that's why in some cultures at a funeral they laugh. And you say, well, wait a minute, isn't that insensitive? Or no, it's actually medicine. So the laughter becomes medicine to start to bring down grief. And so and it's really not that difficult to kind of see. There's the 5 elements, and there's a chart, and that you can use it to regulate. But what I will say is about emotion is you're not your emotion. Okay, we want to look at emotion is a vibrational frequency that runs through us. Like, for example, when somebody says, I am angry, that's actually not correct. What is correct is, I have anger energy running through me. Because the moment you say, I'm angry, you just took on this identification of anger. And now, really, you're angry? I thought you were a human being, or I thought you were a divine, being having a human experience, or however we want to look at that. But you're not anger. Oh, you might have anger energy running through you. Yes, that's correct. So when you even look at the language, then that creates a little space between you and the emotion. And when there's that little dollop of space, you don't take it so seriously. It's not the end of the world. It's like, okay, I have anger energy running through me right now. Here's the situation. Not the first time I've had anger energy running through me. Not the last time I've had gonna have anger energy running through me. Let's take a deep breath and let's manage this situation. Because if we look at anger as wood, and then if you have too much wood element, what regulates wood is metal, and metal is breath. Your mom might have taught you that. I know it's hey, take 10 deep breaths when you're angry. That's good advice. That's good 5 element advice of that breath just lets the anger just regulate and drop down. But a lot of it is just knowing you're not the emotion, because we live in the age of anger, and this is an age of anger and anxiety, and it's the technology that's really created that, because we know all this information comes at us fast. And a lot of times our nervous system isn't even meant to have this, especially with kids. It's actually really, really sad what's going on with kids. I I know in this country, just the anxiety with
worldwide,
kids,
not just States.
Yeah, it's the mental health. A huge emerging business here is inpatient mental health facilities for kids.
Really?
They're popping up all over the place. It's really sad, and it's horrible. And back to this. This is the reason for it. It's like their nervous system isn't ready for that social pressure and all the stuff that goes on there. So that's why these tools become more and more important of just, mastery of emotion, because you can't, once you have emotion, you can't stop it. If I say, well, just don't be angry, just be Zen. It doesn't help, because when you have it running through you, you can't just say don't have it. You have to deal with that emotion, and that's part of it. If you have a liver, you're going to experience anger. If you have lungs or live long enough, you're going to experience grief. I mean, so you need these frequencies. And the other thing about emotion is, let's think of this. Let's go back to, I think we're all familiar with the yin-yang symbol. And yin-yang just means opposites. And so that means the moment something is big, you create small. Like big can't exist without small. You need its opposite, because if everything were big, then nothing were big. So we need contrast. And so if we also look at emotion and we say, hey, let's say a high vibrational emotion. Let's just use the word happiness. Again, let's not get stuck on the word. If you were always happy, you'd never be happy. So the reason happy exists is it has to have a little bit of its opposite. And whatever word we want to use for its opposite, sadness, it doesn't matter. Let's not get stuck on the word, but it needs its opposite. So you actually, emotionally, you need a little dollop of the dark to create the light. Now, when it's like this, the ratio should be here, a little bit of this, a lot of this. When it's here, that's tough. It's tough to function that way, but you do need a little bit of the opposite of the high emotion to have the high emotion.
Huh. It's very interesting. Yeah, I think it's also very practical. Instead of associating yourself with the emotion, you disassociate yourself, and this will allow you to release it quicker. Interesting.
It's also like the saying, you are not your thoughts. It's a famous Zen saying.
Same as the thoughts and the emotions. They're very similar. They're both not yours, basically.
You got it. You are ultimately the observer. My business partner of 25 years, Michael Leone, we wrote this book together. And he likes to say that, we're a little dollop of consciousness temporarily residing in a big bag of flesh. Just like 60 to 80% water is what we are. So we're like this big meat, watery flesh, machine that has this little tiny dollop of, again, we can call it consciousness, we can call it Tao, we can call it God, we can call it whatever word we want to use. But that's ultimately what we are. We're the dollop, we're not the bag, we're not the meat suit. When you can remember that, it creates a little bit space between you and your story, you and the situation, you and the emotion. And when you have that little space, you feel better, you think better, and ultimately you do make better decisions.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. Jason, we are running close to the end of the show and the time we have for today. I'm wondering, are there any other Zen or wellness things which you can run real quick that maybe someone listening in can incorporate in their life? Something notable which we haven't discussed, which may value and benefit someone listening in, kind of to wrap up?
Yeah, well, you know what? I would say if you aren't doing any type of meditation practice, no excuse, sit down, shut up, breathe, and do it, and just do it for 5 minutes. And there's plenty, they can get some of the music, a lot of it, some of it's paid. Some of the music I even made free on Amazon, and I did that on purpose so that nobody has an excuse. Oh, I don't have $5 for an album. Okay, I took that excuse away from you. It's free. Sit down, shut up, use the music, and and do it. If they want a movement course, I mean, we have a bunch of free resources on the zenwellness.us site. You can go to, and there's like a 5-day meditation and movement training program that we do that you can use that to start as well. And then also there's a lot from there. From that website, they can find all the music as well and the whole thing. But it just starts with the realization. And it just starts with, okay, so maybe I can start to use this discipline to become better. And you don't look at it as, oh, it's going to take so much time because I have so much to do and I'm so busy. No, it's actually going to make everything I do a little bit better and a little bit more efficient. And once you start going, I mean, it's what you've experienced. You meditate now, and it's hard to imagine not meditating. It's hard to imagine
Totally. Yeah.
functioning because your mind just gets clear. Your mind gets sharp. It's like, oh, wow, I couldn't imagine. How does everyone function with the foggy, turbid mind? How do you even do it once you get used to doing it?
Very cool. Jason, well, where can people find you online? Is there any place you want to send them besides the zenwellness.us website, which you mentioned?
Yeah, well, that's the main one. The other one for the music, you can go to jasoncampbellmusic.net. And we have all of the music and all of the albums, including the new one that's coming out. And then I have a few more releases actually coming out this summer. There's 2 more albums after this one that are coming out this summer. And they're all geared towards the spiritual teachings are woven into the music. So zenwellness.us and jasoncampbellmusic.net.
Very cool. I'll link to those 2 in the show notes, as well as kind of all the rest of the stuff we talked about. I feel we really just scratched the surface on meditation and some of those things. Maybe we can do a round 2 some other day. Jason, thank you very much for taking your time today and kind of sharing everything with us.
Yeah, and I'd love to do a round 2. Thank you so much for having me on your show. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing in your show and getting all this amazing information out, Yuli.
That's amazing. All right. Good speaking to you.
Take care.
Take care.